Wayne, an alcoholic. Good to be here. Grateful to be sober. I love AA. Thanks for the substitution invite. Cannot remember for the life of me who I corresponded with for this, but uh, thanks as well. I want to say I've known Adam for a long time, and that was a likely story. I'm kidding. You know how we are. I have to say, I have a nickname in the Pacific Northwest, and it's Fill In. And you know, it's an interesting thing. I mentioned this last night because I filled in for someone else last night. And it's like for the past 30 of my 43 years, I've been asked to fill in several times. And I'm very busy in AA. I travel a lot. There's a lot of things I get to be participating in. And I have to say, is it odd or is it God? You know, sometimes God shows up in odd ways, but I have been asked to fill in a lot. And every time I've been asked, it's freaky if you want to know the truth. It's always been an opening. I've always been available to fill in. And it gets needle woven in sometimes. It's like, I'm going to be busy 6 meetings out of the next 8 days. And then you wove these 2 in to the only opens because you picked me at the right time, you see, because most of the meetings I go to out here are 3 hours later than you. And so it leaves the door open. So I just want to say, I think God's in charge. I agree. I know who I work for. My job site right now is somewhere in Tennessee by Zoom. And my job description is in chapter 7 and laid out in our history book, AA Comes of Age. So I'll try to honor that. I won't try. I will stick to the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous to the best of my ability and try to carry a message that a newcomer might find useful for them. I hope if there's anybody new, I'm sure there's someone in here that's new. I'm going to ask you to do yourself a favor and don't judge AA according to my presentation. If you don't like me, that's okay. Just don't like me, but don't use that to not like AA. We all have our peculiarities. That was one of my childhood diagnoses. He is very peculiar, and that went around a lot. And as I have time to look back at my 4-step, let me tell you, I was more than just a little peculiar. So that was really an upgrade at the age of 7. I just want to say that. I'm an alcoholic. I think it's important to identify that. And for the sake of brevity, I think I have 50 minutes. Is that right, 50? For the sake of brevity, I'm going to get right into it. I know what my job is today, and I'll do my best to do that. First of all, before I start, I want to thank my posse for coming out. There's about 40 or 50 sponsees, grand sponsees, and great grand sponsees in this meeting right now. And they come to support me because they love me and they know I love them. And so it's really, we got some Alanonics in that family as well. And I want to thank them for coming out and giving up their time or their evening, because I know some of them are in the UK, some are in Australia, and Dubai, and India. So I just want to thank them for coming out and supporting me. It wasn't always that way. I didn't always have people supporting me. Yeah, I did in a way, if you know what I mean. But that was a long time ago. My sobriety date is November 8th, 1977. I've had no booze, pills, powders, potions, or lotions that unnecessarily affect my emotions from that day to this. I do have a history of dating, mind, and mood altering women, but I quit doing that. It was just too much work, and I'm sure they thought the same thing. And they don't give you a chip for that, so why bother? So there you go. I'm a chippy guy. And so now that I got that nonsense out of the way, I'm 71 years old. I absolutely love AA with all of my heart. I want to say that. I came here under a false impression of what love was. God help you if you said you loved me, because I thought that meant you served me. That's really how I saw the idea of love. And I've got it backwards. I come to find out that when I say I love AA, what I'm saying to you is I'm willing to serve AA at any level I'm asked to serve. My sponsor said, make sure you say yes to legitimate requests for service because it'll pay off in the long run. And here it is, the long run. And he was absolutely true. I think it's very important to identify as an alcoholic right out of the gate. I'll just do you a simple overview of my childhood. I was raised in an alcoholic home, and every kind of abuse you can think of, I was subjected to that of any variety you can imagine. And I'm not going to go into detail on that. That's for a different location with different people. I just want to say that I don't think this is the place to dump all that stuff because I'd have to mention people and places, and I don't want to drag their memories through the mud one more time. Let them rest in peace. But I'll say this, none of my childhood made me an alcoholic, but it makes my story interesting. So I will tell parts of it anecdotally, if you don't mind, because it pertains to my sobriety time in Alcoholics Anonymous. My father was an alcoholic. He achieved sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he took his will back. And 4 members of my family all had sobriety at one time or another in Alcoholics Anonymous. 4 immediate members of my family, and all 4 died drunk, 2 by suicide. And I hate starting out with that way, but it's better to start out than end it with that, don't you think? And it begged the question, why them and not me? I've heard people say, and I know they mean well, I've heard them say that God looked after them. I believe that's probably true. But then that begs the question, well, how come God didn't look after my dad, my cousin, my uncle, and my son-in-law? So those are the kind of things that go through my mind that baffle me as far as some of the stuff that I hear around AA. And so I want to make sure I come out of the only authority in Alcoholics Anonymous is the book Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new, I'm not an authority. I'm just another drunk that's going to pass on some of my experience and hopefully stick to the task and stick to our roadmap right here, this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. So I just want to say this. In my time of drinking, I was under a grave misunderstanding of what alcoholism is. I thought it had to do with how much you drink, when you drank, what happened when you drank. I thought that's what made you alcoholic, but I've come to find out that lots of heavy drinkers, even social drinkers, get drunk, act the fool, get arrested. I know I happened to arrest a lot of drunk drivers, and they were, vast majority of them were not alcoholic. Because here's my test. Every cop has kind of their own test. And we love to ask this question when we pull you over. How many of you had tonight? I love that question. It's my favorite question. And if you want to throw your fingers up just for fun, if I asked you how many of you had tonight, what would you say? That's right, a couple. So if you say a couple, I'm taking you to a meeting. I'll tell you that right now. But these non-alcoholics, these social drinkers, I'll tell you what they do. They actually sit there at the steering wheel and try to count how many they actually had. Those people don't need a meeting. They need a night off. That's what they need, And so I discovered that how much I drank, what I drank, when I drank, what happened when I drank, that's all consequences of drinking. That doesn't necessarily make alcoholism. So what makes me alcoholic? And so when I came here at the age of 23 and they had me read the doctor's opinion and a lot of the big book, I read the description of the real alcoholic, and at 23 years old, I didn't identify with that. I didn't relate. And when they described what a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type was, I didn't relate with that either, because my brother's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type. He's sober 41 years. And that, what I mean by the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type, my brother is just like Dr. Silkworth mentioned in the doctor's opinion, and Bill mentioned to the New York State Medical Society in 1944. He said half of our fellowship would have been normal in every regard, able, intelligent, friendly people, except for the drink. That's my brother. And they said then there's the other 50% are more or less pronounced neurotic. So what I discovered is that I'm a chapter 4 alcoholic. That's what I discovered. I'm Mr. Hyde looking for Dr. Jekyll, which means I've never had a normal mind in my entire life. I was restless. I swear, I had this fear of the darkness, right? That must have been in the womb because they just wouldn't let me out, if you know what I mean. That must have been traumatizing on me. At least that's what I told several therapists. I had these strange fears. I didn't understand them. I didn't understand anything about alcoholism. Many of us know what that means. The guy in the trench coat with a bottle in a paper sack. I don't know. And I discovered that Bill wrote in several places in the book Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12, he wrote that we need not self-knowledge, but a full knowledge of our condition so that this process can take a hold. And I almost missed that. But I want to tell you what I did after I realized I don't really, at 23, identify with the real alcoholic. And then scooting on. So I keep reading because my sponsor said so. And I got to chapter 4. And the title of chapter 4, as we know, is We Agnostics. But I'm not reading that. I'm not agnostic. I believe in God. I'm a churchgoer. I'm going to be an Episcopal clergyman if I ever straighten out. This is what I want to be. I love God. And I'm that strange bird that's never blamed God for anything. Somehow I understood the concept of free will. Somehow I understood that God isn't a Santa Claus. And so when bad things happened to me, I somehow knew it was the people doing it to me because I knew it was me doing it to them and it wasn't God. So if I'm doing it to people, and they're doing it to me, God ain't got nothing to do with it. So that's a problem in and of itself. It's like a problem. It's like a paradox of duality, because if God's not the problem, God can't be the solution. So why read chapter 4? I don't know if any of you back of the book readers, what I mean by that is when you get a book, you go to the back. I go to the back and read the ending. And if I don't like the ending, why bother with the rest of the book? It just doesn't make sense. And so how many of you have taken the John Hopkins 20 questions? Go ahead. We can play along a little bit. Now, I don't mean no offense to nobody, but this has got to be the dumbest test I've ever seen in my life to give to an alcoholic. And I'm going to tell you why. Most people try to sneak up on us alcoholics. How do you catch a unique rabbit? Well, you unique up on them. And so that's the same with us. So if you notice on the 20 questions test, at the bottom of the test, where it's in full view for everybody, it quantifies your responses. And I just want to go through this because it's important. First one, I'm going to put it in the first person. If I answered yes to any one of the questions, there's a definite warning I may be an alcoholic. So 1 is kind of iffy. 2, if you have answered yes to any 2, the chances are that you are alcoholic. There ain't going to be 2. And then 3, I love this. If I answered yes to 3 or more, I am definitely alcoholic. I might give you probably, but I ain't giving you definitely. So I don't care what's on this test. I ain't circling or checking 3. I can promise you that. My only question is, do I give you 1 or 2? Because if I only give you 1, you might be suspicious. If I give you 2, that might give you too much rope. I'm not quite sure what I want to do. So I just lied. And then I get to the big book, and I'm finally convinced to read chapter 4. I'm finally convinced that maybe I misunderstood the intent of the title, We Agnostics. And it's interesting. Within the first paragraph, I found out I'm alcoholic. And it's so simple, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're new, it is this simple. Sometimes it isn't convincing enough, but it is that simple. So on page 44, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read it in the first person. I know. You know what? I go to a lot of conventions. I hate speakers that quote pages and sound like they got it memorized. I do. It just bothers me. I want to throw coffee arrows at them. So on page 44, here's what it says. If, when I honestly want to, do I find I cannot quit drinking entirely? I threw the word drinking in there. If, when I honestly want to, do I find I cannot quit? I can lie. Pat, I can lie to you. Laura, the Al-Anon, I can lie to you. Oh my God, Jim, I can lie to you. Stephen, I can lie to you. I can quit anytime. I told the cops I can quit anytime. I told the United States Navy I don't need to go to treatment just because I had a blackout and misplaced the captain's kids. I don't need treatment. I only drink beer. And they said, either you go to treatment or you're going home. I love the military. I want you to understand that. I've got ribbons and medals that I earned in the Vietnam War when I was there. I was proud of my service and I planned on making it a career. But when it became the career or drinking, I didn't know how manifest I was in protecting my right to drink, but I took that discharge and went home in shame rather than go to treatment for something I cannot believe I've got. And so I can tell anybody I can quit anytime, but you know what? There's one that I can't lie to. You see, I'm not a psychopath and I'm not a true sociopath, which means I may be in a delusion, but when I look at that man in the mirror, I can't lie to him. I can sell everybody but me a bill of goods. And so when I looked at me in that mirror, I knew I couldn't quit drinking. And so I just made the decision, I don't want to. And I want to tell you how deep that old idea can go. It's deadly. And the second sentence is, or if when drinking, do I have little control over the amount I take? There again, same thing. I know once I pick up that first drink, I'm baffled by it. I like Bill wrote Cunning, Baffling, Powerful for alcohol. Why? Because it's very baffling. I know enough science to know it's a scientific fact. Ethanol alcohol is not addictive by nature. That's a bill of goods other people are selling by nature. Why? Because 9 out of 10 people can drink safely. God gave us all the genes and the enzymes we need, but some of us got shortened, I guess, and I can't process alcohol the way I'm supposed to. But why is it that it's so baffling that once I take a Budweiser into my system, I don't know what it is. I only planned on drinking 1 or 2. Then I drink up drinking for 3 or 4 days until something stops me. I didn't understand that. And so What saved me was right at the end of that is you are probably alcoholic. Probably. That was close because I know probably is not definitely. Anybody relate to that? Yeah, that was close. And I just want to say this before I go any further. In my opinion, in my 43 years plus change one day at a time of sobriety, I've noticed this to be true. Most of us die between probably and definitely. So how does one like me go from probably alcoholic to definitely alcoholic? So when I raised my hand and said I'm alcoholic, it's a good start, but it has very little power, very little depth and weight. It's just an admission. So how do I go from admission to commission to where I get this. I'm willing to do anything you say. At first, it's desperation. At first, for me, it was desperation to follow my sponsor's guidance at first. But you know what happens? As soon as that desperation begins to wane away, oh, by the way, I don't like that term, wane away. It just bothers me for some reason. But as the desperation began to wane away, I was all of a sudden not as willing as I was. I was all of a sudden, this is a lot of work. I didn't understand what was happening to me. You see, desperation drove me. Bill wrote, under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA. Driven. And I was driven. But when that desperation began to lift, unbeknownst to me, I'm glad I had a sponsor. I'm so glad I had a sponsor. So I want to jump in my experience. I think it's brilliant. I tell you, one of my favorite chapters is how it works. And I want to tell you why. It explained why 4 members of my family before me and after me all had sobriety and died drunk. How did Bill Wilson know to write that in how it works? And it's read at almost every meeting I go to and has been read at almost every meeting for 43 years. Sometimes I think it's kind of a tragedy because I think we get so used to hearing it that sometimes we zone out, check our phone, depends on where you're at, and play grabby with the guys next door because we hear it so often. And I almost missed the meat and potatoes of how it works in the first 2 sentences. And I just want to touch on that if I may. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Do you know it was years, painful, undrunk, unsober years, painful, where I didn't realize the word path is not plural. And I began to pluralize the AA path with all kinds of outside nonsense that has nothing to do with our work. A lot of scientific, interesting things, a lot of religious, interesting things, a lot of medicine, interesting things, but absolutely none of those have anything to do with our work in AA. And Dr. Bob alluded to that in his last message. Let's keep it simple, Bill. Let's not louse us up with a bunch of Freudian complexes and other things that are interesting to the mind, but have very little to do with our actual work in AA. And I'm here. I just want to talk about that. I was pluralizing the path with professionalism, with stuff outside of here. And I wasn't aware of Tradition 8 yet, where I'm supposed to help guard AA against professionalism. And I'm part of that guard. And here I am bringing in all this language of professionalism and all these different concepts that they have that have nothing to do with our work in AA. And I was guilty of that. I guess that's why I share that in my talk, is to make amends for that period of time where I counter-influenced several new people with a language that they don't hear in our literature. And I hope I've corrected that. And the second sentence tells me why my family members died drunk, and it could happen to me. It could happen to me, newcomer. 43 years, one day at a time. This could happen to me. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. And you know what? The dilemma with that is that I discovered with all 4 of my family members who all had good sobriety at one time, that surrender they gave us, they took it back. And for different reasons, to each, they picked up that first drink. And what I now understand, because of how it works and because of that, they no longer completely gave themselves up to this simple program. And I want to just say this for the newcomers. Therein lies, in my opinion, why sponsorship is so critically important for an alcoholic knucklehead like me. And I'll tell you why. I've got this brain. I love my brain. It comes up with all kinds of interesting fantasies. It comes up with its own treatment plan. Oh, but I'm going to channel Scott Redmond for a minute. If any of you ever heard Scott Redmond from out in the valley, I'm going to channel him for just a minute. I have a treatment plan of my own, and I know some of you do too. If you're new, we know you have a treatment plan. So please tell one of us before we leave tonight, because we could use a little bit of humor here if you're anything like me. Because here's how I treat some of the symptoms of the ism, being asthmatic, some of the isms that I have. I treat loneliness with isolation. I don't know about any of you. I get lonely. I go off by myself, and it's just terrible. I treat anxiety with caffeine and sugar. And I treat loneliness and I treat depression with country western music. I mean, I put all those three together: isolation, caffeine and sugar, and country western music. I'll tell you, I need a sponsor. And here's another reason why. I did not understand this, but when I came to AA, it's all about me. I'm sure none of you in Tennessee relate to this. Probably it's always all about me. And I didn't understand this. I didn't understand what part of my dilemma was. But I'm always consumed with me, and I don't know how to get out of that. And so as we roll along here, when we're new and trying to find our way, it's easy for me to get lost. It's easy for me to fall off the path and not know that I've fallen off the path, that drift off. So I need a sponsor, because everything about sentence 2 is subjective. What's it mean to completely give myself to this simple program? I don't know about any of you alcoholics and Al-Anonics, but I have to tell you, my idea of completely giving myself to this program is 1 meeting a month. Now, that's my opinion. And get a job, that is not in my wheelhouse. I don't know why you came up with that, but subjectively speaking, I don't need a job. I do fine. I live in a dumpster on Skid Row. Who needs a job? I got no responsibilities here. Never mind how lonely and sad and depressed I am, but who needs that and for what? And my point is that I lived a life that was subjective to everything. I need a sponsor, someone who has experience in this way of life, to their objectivity to override my subjectivity. Like when it comes, I remember, how many of you remember when O'Doul's non-alcoholic beer came out? How many of you remember that? Remember that? It was a scourge for a while. A lot of people went out on that because it's non-alcoholic beer. I remember now I'm a Budweiser. I'm a Bud man. King of beers, baby. I'll tell you, there's days I haven't had a drink for a while now, and there's days I miss Budweiser. I just do. I miss the way of life that I had with alcohol sometimes. Now, where I live in Los Angeles, West Los Angeles, when we go out to the valley to go to a meeting or something, we take the 405 north out over the valley, over the hill. And when you get on the other side of the hill by the 101 freeway going east and west, on the west side of the freeway at the Roscoe Boulevard exit, in case anybody's interested, there's the Anheuser-Busch Brewery, and they got a big Budweiser sign. I swear when I drive by there, I slow down, have a moment of silence. Now, that's odd. I mean, that's just odd. I loved Budweiser. I loved everything about it, and that's odd because it tastes terrible, actually, when you think about it. I didn't understand any of this. And so I need serious help, and I need objectivity. I have no personal objectivity. I don't. And I need a sponsor and friends in AA that are more interested in my recovery than they are my itty-bitty feelings, my perceptions about life. I don't know about you, but our book talks about how we wax philosophically. I tell you what, I gave some great philosophical speeches when I lived on Skid Row with other Skid Row bums like me. And by the way, back then you weren't homeless. You was a bum. And they tell you you're a bum. It's like, I can say that pretty good because it was true. I was a bum. That's just the way it was. And I didn't understand this. And so a sponsor picked me. I didn't pick him. I'm 23 years old. This guy who picked me named Barney. Let me tell you how that happened. Someone suggested I go to this address and these people would help me. And so, and I went, and I'm kind of clumsy, plus a little drunk too. That might've been a problem. But I went to this, and he told me that go to this address, 410 16th Street, Moline, Illinois, and there'll be some friends of his. Go down there and tell them Harvey sent you, and they're going to help you. I heard money, food, or shelter. That's what I heard. That's the only reason I went the next day. I don't want help that way. I want something to eat, maybe a pack of Pell Mell Reds. I'd like a tailor-made cigarette for a change. I'm a curb butt smoker. If you dropped it, I pick it up. That's just the way it is. I get down there about noontime. He said, go down there about noontime. He said, there's a light bulb hanging behind one of those windows. If it's on, go in. They're waiting for you. It's like do, like Twilight Zone time. So to make a long story short, I got there. I found the light bulb and it wasn't on. It was flickering. Now, he didn't tell me what to do if it was flickering. He said, if it's on, go in. He didn't tell me what to do if it was flickering. I don't know if there's any other chronic thinkers in this meeting right now, but I started thinking about that light bulb. I need something to eat and I want some pocket dough and tailor-made cigarettes. That light's got to stop flickering. I'm getting angry at that light bulb and it won't stop flickering. I'm so anal retentive that I couldn't go in. I don't know why the light wouldn't put. So I went to Larry's Oasis and mooched me some Budweisers from the people who feel sorry for old Lil Wayne. Get oiled up, and I go back that night. And interestingly enough, it's about 8 o'clock. Now, you guys probably can tell what the story's going to be. I get there about 8 o'clock that night. I don't know why I went back there, except in my mind, they owe me now. I've been through a lot thinking about that light bulb. And I get back there, and they owe me, so I'm going in. And I went into that basement cellarway, into this what turned out to be an AA meeting. And I'm 6'3". That door header's 5'10" going into the basement. And I cracked my eyebrow right into that door header on a full steam. And it knocked it. My head hit it. And if you ever hit your head on something, it jacked me back. I literally fell back, hit the deck flat on my back, and slid into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And inside that room was 6 or 7 old men, all old, miserable men, in my opinion. And I slid right between two of them. And this old grizzly one gets up out of his chair, stands over me, and goes like this. Gives me the safe sign. And then he said, slide right in here, you big dummy. And then he says, we got a wrench to fit every nut that comes in the door. And by the looks of you, it's going to have to be an adjustable wrench. I didn't like that guy immediately, but I couldn't breathe to tell him because the wind was knocked out of me. When I finally got my breath back, he's picking me up off the deck. I'm 23 years old. Picks me up off the deck. I just moved into my dumpster a couple of months before. I mean, I got a new place to live. And then he says to me, my name's Barney. I didn't ask. Now I don't care. I'm hungry. What about the help? Let's get this going. What about, you ain't reaching in your pocket, Barney. And then he says, and I'm an alcoholic. And I thought, oh, you poor miserable SOB. That is so sad. And then I've been in how many of you been in therapy? And I'm not putting down therapy, but you'll get what I mean. I've been in therapy so many times that I know when that man or woman on the other side of that desk is telling me something about themselves, I know what they're doing. They're trying to get me to give something up. That's what they're doing. They're trying to prime the pump, if you know what I mean. So when he said I'm an alcoholic, I thought about it for a second, and I looked right at him and I said, well, I'm ADD. He says, I'll bet you are. And then I said, I'm on a roll, right? So I said, you know what else I am? He said, what's that? I'm OCD. He says, I'll bet you are. And then I thought I won. I thought this challenge was over. And then he says, you know what else I think you might be? He caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting. And I said, what? He said, I think you might be ODD. And I know if you ever read the DSM book, the diagnostic book for psychiatrists, there in the DSM-3, there's no diagnosis of ODD. So I said to him, what's that? He said, you are very odd. And I didn't like him right away. And then he says, and I'm going to be your sponsor. Now I want to tell you something. At that point in time, I'm 23 and he is 40 years my senior. 5 years later, I got sober. I went to meetings on a regular basis, drank every time, never had a desire to stop drinking. And for 5 years, when they would say, I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, I would raise my hand and give them one of the 21 diagnoses I had from psychiatry. I've been in 17 psychiatric institutions. And if you're interested, you can Google my home away from home. I was in what's known as, quote, the Watertown Insane Asylum. That was its name. I was in there 14 times. You'll see a tower in the middle. You don't want to go in there. But I came to AA convinced I'm psychiatric, convinced. I've been medicated since the age of 9 for one of 18 diagnoses. I got 3 more misdiagnoses when I was 7 years sober. I ended up with 21 misdiagnoses. Now, I can say that because it was me, and I understand what I'm talking about, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But the thing I never got diagnosed in the psychiatric hospital is alcoholic. Never got diagnosed that. because they were going by my behavior, and they can't study the human spirit. So there's no way they could diagnose me as having a spiritual illness of alcoholism. They couldn't do that. And so I just want to move ahead really quickly. After 17 trips to the psych ward, I've been arrested 9 times, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not proud of that. I'm just stating the facts right now. I was arrested 9 times. Now, I heard many people in AA, and I'll bet you have too, that people will say, I didn't always get arrested when I was drinking, but every time I've been arrested, I've been drinking. You see, that's not my story. I'm a Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll. I've been arrested 9 times, twice while drinking, 7 times without a drink in my body, going to AA meetings. Not proud of that, but you see, my dilemma got worse when I wasn't drinking. My brother, 41 years sober, when he stopped drinking, he leveled out, and he's been a fine example of a man ever since. Took the steps once, sponsors the same 2 guys for 39 years now, and he thinks I'm insane. Nicknamed me Insane Wayne. He nicknamed me Smoking Volcano, because even though he's alcoholic and he uses the same big book I use, he's like Dr. Bob. And I turned out to be a lot like that Bill W. guy, and I did not know the difference between the two. And you know what? My sobriety was difficult. I didn't understand. I was educated into believing that I'm psychiatric. And there are people who do have organic mental illness. So I'm not talking about them. But they were treating me like I had organic mental illness with all those diagnoses and prescriptions. And I didn't know that. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. But at least somebody, Bill said perhaps science will one day accomplish this feat of discovering what's up, but they haven't done so yet. And here it is, almost 86 years later, they still ain't figured it out. And I want to say this before I get any further. You know how Bill wrote, here are steps we took. Remember, somebody emphasized that at the start of the meeting when they were reading the 12 steps. Remember where he says, here are the steps we took. Have any of you ever got cocky with your sponsor before you knew better? Anybody? Or is it just me? Well, we were reading and said, here are the steps we took. So I said to Barney, well, where'd they took them? I thought it was cute, right? And he says, you big dummy. He watched Sanford and Son. He was legendary. And he says, they took them to heart. You might try it. And they always walk away after they get you. Have you ever noticed that these old timers never stick around? They just get you and then they go home or something and do whatever they do. Leave me with the resentment, But here are the steps we took. We don't work them. We use that frame of reference, and sometimes wrongly, I think. Here are the steps we took. And I like how Bill wrote on page 15, paragraph 3, the 12 and 12. He gave me a view of this that has held me in good stead all these years. He said, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles. The steps. Here are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if, now I know I'm goofy, but I know the word if means a condition, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And I want to report to you that I have come to believe that I love drinking for one reason only, besides the fun I used to have, is the effect produced, that abnormal, unusual, extemporaneous effect of seeming normalcy. You see, I'm Mr. Hyde, but when I drink, I seem to be okay. I fit in my skin. The things around me change from black and white and gray to living color. I had no idea I was having the semblance of a spiritual experience due to the effect produced by alcohol. And I know enough science to know now alcohol is not supposed to do that. Alcohol is supposed to do one thing and one thing only. I hope you'll forgive this little bit of science, but I'm going to do it anyway. I didn't understand what ethanol alcohol is biochemically indicated to do, and it does it to 9 out of 10 drinkers. Alcohol is supposed to do one thing and one thing only, newcomer. Only one thing. It's a central nervous system suppressant. That's it. It's supposed to sedate you. But how many of us had a contrary effect? You give me 4 or 5 Budweisers and I get so good looking, I want to dance with everybody. Dogs, cats, women, I don't care. I'll dance with anybody. I get smart and I don't, this isn't intellectual. This is an experience. Something happens that my skin goes from choking tight to where I can breathe. What I'm having, unbeknownst to me, is what the steps and the way of life promise me. They promise me 2 goals. And along the way of those goals, we have over 153 promises laid out in all of the steps. But it gives me the goal of AA. And I think this is important to share. I think it's important to know. is what's this about? What's the goal? Is it just to get a relationship with God? What is the goal? And I have been wised up by many old timers and many experienced members of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've been fortunate with and blessed with the influencers I've had, is AA presents two goals. One is victory over alcohol. And the second is freedom from the bondage of self. And why is that important? Because I can't have one without the other. If I don't have freedom from the bondage of self, I don't have victory over alcohol. And that's a key idea for me to know. And, I've gone all these years one day at a time knowing that that's pretty much the deal. And then further on in how it works in part B, how brilliant was Wilson to write that ABC at the end. And part B, probably the most misquoted sentence in our entire book. I've heard people say no human power for 43 years. No human power, they say, but that isn't what it says. It says probably no human power. And folks, it's not talking about me and you. If you read Bill Wilson's history, this was magic to me. This helped me have a sponsor. It helped me talk to my neighbors in AA, because no human power tells me you can't help me. You're human. And I misidentified it. And of course, I was too proud to ask my sponsor to explain it to me. And so I ran around AA deluded with the idea that no human power can relieve me of my alcoholism. So I don't need a sponsor, don't need you. It was baffling to me how I saw that. And then one day it occurred to me, and it was pointed out to me, that in part B, I've had that experience. You see, the human powers of medicine, psychiatry, psychology, sociology, theology, and pharmacology, those human powers failed to relieve me of my alcoholism. But for 43 years and some change, one day at a time, God in AA does, and still does relieve me of my alcoholism one day at a time. Don't you see? You see, it isn't that we're a human power in AA. We are humans powered by AA and the God that's behind that. And I need to know that, because there's so many shiny objects. I'm one of those guys that I get distracted easily by shiny objects. And there's a lot of shiny objects circling around AA all the time. And that's why I'm a student of the book. I'm the student of all three of our primary books, the big book, the 12 and 12, and AA Comes of Age, because in these books is the path. When they wrote AA Comes of Age, our only unadulterated history book written by our pioneers and published in 1957, that history book paints a clear picture of the successes and the failures as we attempted to find our way out of the darkness into the light. And I think this is something that's important to share as well. I love God. I want to talk about the third step for just a second, because the topic here is serenity, isn't it? And I need serenity. I need peace of mind. And I've got this racing mind. Anybody else? I've got this racing mind that betrays me. There isn't nothing out there trying to get me. Nobody's trying to get me. Nothing else is trying to get me. I just have this condition called being asthmatic. I have this internal spiritual maladjustment as codified on page 55 of the big book and in the doctor's opinion. I'm in full flight from reality, the great reality. I've become an outright mental defective. Not organically mentally sick. I have become spiritually sick. And that spiritual sickness looks like psychiatry. And sometimes it is. But the living proof in my life is here I am with you folks. And all those symptoms that got diagnosed along the way have gone by the wayside. They have all little by little by little gone away. And most of the time I was the last one to notice it. It's just I had to stick to the task here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because folks, if I ever drink again, it's going to be only for one reason. One reason only, is because I took my surrender back. And I no longer completely give myself to this simple program. And I think it's a lot easier for us who've been around a while to do that than newcomers who are desperate. And because of that desperation are willing to do almost anything. But now, sober a few years, it seems to play out differently. It's more important now than ever for me to work with sponsees. I want to tell you about my last 24 hours. I was called at the last minute to fill in yesterday. I moved some stuff around because that's a legitimate request for service. And then I had a celebration of a sponsee with 28 years. I went to another meeting in town and gave him a cake. And then we went and we had dinner. I got home late. I got up this morning and went to the international group of the Buy the Book speakers meeting. Went to that meeting at 7:00. And then after that, I had 2 AAs, 137 years sober, 132, and began to take them back through the steps because they're suffering emotionally. And then I got done with that. And then I had a noon meeting. And then now I'm here. And then after I do this, I've got to drive out to Covina and participate in a function out there. And you know what? That keeps me in the mix. Now, some people aren't interested in that, and that is, I got 10 minutes left. None of my business what other people do, but I took the third step. Now, the first time I took the third step, it was rushed, and it was really not much depth and weight. Second time I took the third step was different because I was operating on a different basis. You know, and I want to play with that a little bit. You know, on page 62, God, I hate that when people do that. On page 62, where it says God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are his children. I want to tell you how important that was for me. That's one of the reasons I'm still here with you, good people, is because I realize I've been misinformed my whole life, mainly by my own perceptions. Nobody did this to me. Like I said, there's nothing trying to get me. And I need to understand that this is a soul sickness, just like Reverend Sam Shoemaker bore down on Bill about. And it was codified by Dr. Carl Jung with Roland. And it was also further codified by Dr. Silkworth and Father Ed Dowling and Dr. Harry Tebow, the first psychiatrist to actually accept the AA way of life. It was codified. And this thing about me, this perplexing, baffling feature of my mind, thinking I'm all mentally ill and stuff. I don't know. And so as I go down this path and try to find my way, I need you people to light that path too. I'm not the path. I'm on the path. And I want to stay that way. I kind of lost where I was going with that other topic, but I might get back to it and I might not, and whatever. I've learned that, sometimes, is it God or is it God? Sometimes something comes in there and sends us a different direction that we need to talk about. So what I'll do is I'll fast forward. I became a cop sober. That's impossible. It's impossible. Arrested 9 times, 17 psychiatric institutionalizations, medication from the age of 9 to 27. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible if it's God's will. I want to tell you that right now. Because when I was 10 years sober, after retaking this, I know where I was going with that. See there, it brought me back. God's will. I have always been baffled. Thank you. I've always been baffled by who am I? Anybody else? Raise your hand. Anybody else been baffled by who am I? It's like, and I'll tell you why I think that is for me. I don't know about you, but society has conditioned us to believe many things. And I'm not blaming. I'm just reporting what I believe to be true. They condition me to think who I am is what I do. And that's a baffling thing because who I am, according to page 62, is singular. Who I am is singular. And my life changed in AA when I had this awakening. Who I am is singular, child of God. I was so excited to tell my sponsor, Barney, I know who I am. I know who I am. And he said something I'm not going to repeat. It was kind of vulgar. He says, no kidding, sort of is a short abbreviated version of that. No kidding. And I said, well, I know who I am now. I'm a child of God. He says, well, we want you to try to be an adult child of God. How about you try that? And then it went on. And then in step 5, we found out about humility and what humility means. To be a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. And what I discovered, then you go to page 63 and it says, I have a new employer. And he goes on to say that he will take care of my every need if I perform his work well. And I had another experience, folks, another shift, another phase of my development began that day when I realized who I am is singular. I don't know about any of you, but I went around telling everybody. They were tired of hearing it. I have to tell you, everybody said, really, thank you for sharing. It's like I had the who confused with the what. You see all that stuff that was in my 4th step. I thought that's who I was. All that stuff in my 8-step list. I thought that's who I was. And no, that's just what I did. and what I've become, but not who I am. And one of the reasons I carried myself in all those ways was because I had the who confused with the what. And the shame and the remorse that followed was killing me. And so when you go to page 63, here's the awakening I had. It says I have a new employer. What's that make me? That makes me the employee. And he tells me in step 12 what my job is: to stay sober and carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all my affairs. That's my job. That's part of my job. And now I want to go through the steps backwards to make my final point about this. You see, step 12, chapter 7 is my job description. How do you like that? He knew a knucklehead like me wouldn't know what I was doing. So when somebody says, Wayne, will you help me? I go to chapter 7 and I said, let's do it. And I go through I use chapter 7 as my template. Still to this day, my template for sponsorship is chapter 7. That's my job description in AA. My job site right now is somewhere in Tennessee via Zoom. That's my job site. I know who I work for. I'm the employee. What a wonderful thing to know in the AA way of life is that perception of step 3. I know who I am. He's the director. He's my principal. I'm his agent. So my job is like when I was contacted to fill in for Adam. That person that contacted me was his agent. Now I know that because he doesn't know me from Adam. A little pun there. He doesn't know me from Adam. And he calls me and wants me to fill in on Adam's testimony of my character, I suppose. That's an agent for change right there. So I know he's acting as God's agent. And so I only have one answer. If I don't have something on my calendar at that time, the answer is yes, because he's an agent for the higher power. And I'm his agent. And you know, that perception and that belief holds me in good stead to this very day. And you know what? It's relieved me of the obsession to drink. It's allowed me to become happily and usefully whole. Think about how wonderful that is to know who I am. And now I'm able to conduct myself like maybe I actually believe that. And the 12 steps have given me the power. You see, and real quickly, I learned in step 1 what my problem is. Step 2, what my other problem is spiritually. Step 3, who I work for and who I belong to. And steps 4 through 9 clear away all of that makes me unemployable to him. Step 10 keeps me employable in the AA world to him, not to you, to him. And step 11 gives me the power to do the job. Before I came on this meeting, I grabbed a cup of coffee and I did a little bit of 11-step work about 5 minutes before I came on, because I wanted to try to be as spiritually fit as I could. And even though I can't keep my ego out of it completely, it can come in here and be managed, I think. And step 12 is where I get to use that power and that job description to carry his message to his kids that for 5,000 years of recorded history were dying in the streets from alcoholism with no hope at all, none at all. And all those programs that came before us, the Washingtonians, the Oxford Group, the Emmanuel Movement, Courtney Baylor and his crew, all these attempts to solve the alcoholic dilemma failed for one reason or another. So God picked Bill W., a bankrupt stock speculator, imagine that, to take his last drink on December 11th, 1934. And for 6 months, nobody got sober, and he wondered why. And Lois told him, Bill, you're sober. Just offhanded, Bill, you're sober. And there was an important striking of a match right there. And then who's he run into next? You see, Dr. Silkworth told Bill, quit telling the religious and spiritual stuff. Tell him what I told you that brought on your desperation. Tell him the medical feature first, then give him the news about the spiritual illness. And the very next person for Bill to talk to was Dr. Bob, a 4-year member of the Oxford Group already. Bob was far more educated with theology than Bill ever was. And so if he'd have come at Bill or Bob with all that stuff, I don't think we'd be here. So instead, he told him the medical feature of the allergy and the obsession. And then after Bob identified with that, Bill told him about the spiritual feature. And then I think that drove Bob to take a couple more beers. And Bob went and had a couple more beers. And as we all know, there's a debate about the actual day. June 10th, 1935 was the day Dr. Bob took his last drink. And isn't God got a sense of humor? He picked a drunken proctologist. Now, God knew there's going to be some people that would need his help, metaphorically, as they came along. And these two guys, two polar opposite personalities, one driven by intellect and one driven by emotion. And he knew that there's half of us are normal without a drink, and half of us are more or less pronounced neurotic without a drink. And it brought us together. And here we are. Mind if I take a couple more minutes? 2 more? You guys okay with that? Okay, no answer. So I guess that means I can talk for an hour. Okay. Okay. I saw you, Steve. Thanks. I just want to say this. Here it is coming out of a pandemic year. Remember when we got sober a long time ago, some of you folks? Payphones. You know what those are, newcomer? Payphone. There was no caller ID. You know, if there had been caller ID, you might have a different speaker here because my sponsor, I don't know. It was really hard back then. It wasn't easy. And I think that was good that we didn't. But look at the technology we have. I didn't know what to think about Zoom at first. But think about this. If this pandemic would have hit 10 years ago, what would we have done? So God gives us what we need sometimes before we need it, because this technology was in place before the pandemic hit. And now here I am in Tennessee, giving an AA talk to the best of my ability, trying to do my job. And I know many of you get to hear different speakers. You get to speak, you get to travel around, and we get to meet people all around the world we never would have met. But I got to tell you, I'm going to a meeting Monday night that's in person. I can't wait to go speak at that meeting in person. But now we got both. But I'm going to make sure I go to regular in-person meetings for the majority, because I know how easy it would be for me to get lazy and lethargic and not be committed and in service, because I know how I am. I know who I am and I know how I am. Now that knowledge alone is not sufficient, but it helps me stay motivated to do God's work in AA to the best of my ability. So I'll close with this. With all those human powers that failed me, it's not their fault. And here's why. You see, they're designed to treat disease. That's what they're trained and taught to do. But you see, in my opinion, AA is not designed to treat disease of any kind. In my opinion, AA is designed to treat one thing and one thing only: spiritual malady and the resulting mental and emotional disorders that are resulted from the illness of alcoholism, not organic mental illness. That's a whole different thing. I need to know that, because it's so easy to find ways to slip out of AA, to go off the path. Besides that, I don't want to leave you guys. There's some real characters. I've been kind of scoping through the windows. There's some real interesting people in this meeting. I have to tell you that. I'm one of them. So I'm going to close with this. I promise. I love AA. You give me an opportunity to give back. That's priceless. We do this for fun and for free. If you're new, I hope you stay. I hope you keep coming back. I hope you have a sponsor, you get a home group, you get commitments, and you do the deal. Because when you do the deal, I believe God loads the dice in your favor. You cannot fail. I'll leave it there.